Hi, and welcome to the Reclamation Project podcast. We are so glad that you're here, that you're listening, and hopefully that you are a part of the conversation. Over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of been talking through a couple different aspects of life that I think are just imperative for us all to really understand and hopefully make positive changes to incorporate into our lives. And that is, first of all, work-life ratio, which we brought in Brenda, and she had a great story about how that worked out in her life. And we kind of talked about how that can work out in our lives, of having a good work-life ratio to where work isn't so demanding and so all-encompassing that it impacts our social life, our relationships with family, with friends, with God, and how it's okay to work less and be less busy and have more things that we say yes to in life that cultivate relationships with others and with God. And then last week we talked a little bit more about that concept and the fact of being present and how sometimes we can get so in our heads and be planning and not so much doing, but planning and thinking about all these things that could happen, would happen, or we can sit there and get so introverted into our phones, if introverted is even a word, but we're going to make it up, but introverted into our phones and engaged with our phones and our technology, whether it be TV, phones, tablets, computers, all that stuff, to where we're not even present, and how that really kind of impacts the relationships that we can have and the way that we can interact with people and with God, and how it really is inundating our society, our kids, how they can feel abandoned because of it, how our spouses can feel abandoned because of it if we don't become more present, engaging, intentional in our lives. And so we've talked about those things, and now we're kind of piggybacking again off of those things in a spirit of rest, in a spirit of stillness, in a spirit of getting our life in balance. As new agey as that might sound, I think it's also a biblical principle that we have rest and we have rejuvenation and rebirth of life, that we have abundant life where we are having relationship, which is also a biblical principle of having a relationship with each other. You look at Acts, where the church had everything in common, and they loved and they ate together and they did things together, and they gave to each other as each one had need, and they listened to the disciples' teachings. That's all community-based stuff that we have to have the time and the cognitive thought pattern and ability to be able to do. And so it's important that we deal with these things, work-life ratio and being present. And this week, kind of talking about a space where I've been, which is sometimes we can get into seasons or even lifestyles of being kind of in survival mode. We get so busy, so inundated with all the junk going on around us that we're just trying to get through this moment, this hour, this day, this week. Everybody's working for the weekend, as a great song once said.
80s song.
I don't know if it's great, but a song once said, everybody's working for the weekend. And sometimes that's how we act, is we're working for the weekend. We're just trying to get to that place of rest, and we are in survival mode trying to do so. How many times I've talked to Gary, we've gone to lunch to talk about podcasts or just talk in general. And I've said, Gary, I'm just trying to survive today. I'm just trying to get through today. And how that's impacted my marriage and my kids because of it is because once I get through that survival, I just want to veg when I get home, and then I'm not present. It's a full circle here.
Full circle.
But then I'm not present because I just survived and I just want to relax and rest now. Being in survival mode can severely impact our ability to be present, our ability to engage, our ability to be intentional, and our ability to have deep, long-lasting, loving, incredible relationships. I think survival mode is a place that can just hurt us and bog us down and really pigeonhole us and keep us away from saying yes to some good things. And so that's what we want to talk about today, is really what it means to not just survive, But as Switchfoot said, I want to thrive, not just survive. And so that's really what we're talking about, is how do we thrive? How do we have the fullness and enjoy the fullness of what we're around and what we're inundated with, instead of just being so much in a place of stress, anxiety, survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're going today.
Whenever you talk about being stuck, it almost always points back to a perspective, because sometimes when you think you're stuck and you change your perspective, you realized, oh, I wasn't stuck. I was just stalled for a moment. And that moment was important because so forth and so on. If you go back a couple of weeks to our conversation on our podcast with Brenda, she talked about that horrible moment where God said no and she really wanted to say yes. But that place of stuckness is when all the action changed in her life, her relationship with her husband, or God speaking to him. And so stuckness is really a perspective. And so sometimes we need to just identify maybe stuck is good for the moment. But I also think we're talking about that moment. Stuckness could also mean like a hopelessness. I just don't have the energy or the motivation just to move. And then past couple of weeks, we've talked about that with work-life ratio. We've talked about that with relationships. And I think ultimately it has to do with our spiritual life too. I can't remember who said it, but they said we are not just human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So I think what I've found in my life and in my practice with people is when we attack the spiritual aspect of something, it kind of just changes all the other things on the outside. And again, it goes back to perspective. I think, growing up, my friend's dad and my dad were so much alike. And they had, the Catholics had 7 deadly sins. Well, they had those plus 2 more that they added, and one they were trying to drill down on. And one of them was, my dad's was big things about not to be a sloth, not to be lazy. It was Saturday morning. If I was still in bed at 8, it was a problem. Then he was also, don't be a taker. Do not be a taker. We're givers. Howls are givers. Howls don't whine, and howls are givers. And so if we went over to people's house and I wasn't allowed, don't you ask for something. If they offer, you can take it. And I wonder if I want a pop. Nope, you get water and want ice. Nope, don't ask for ice because that puts people out. You're not a taker. I just learned how to beat the system, they'd say, would you like something to drink? Well, I really would like pop with ice, but I guess I'll just take water. They'd bring me pop with ice. But, as I look back over the perspective of, when I look back through Facebook, we just got done 2 weeks on social media, I see people who came through the ministry over the last 20 years, and I'm thinking, wow, some of them have thrived and some of them have tanked. And honestly, I think it all goes back to the perspective of God. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding that God is a taker. And so we relegate our relation with him to saying, what is the minimal I can give him not to tick him off and still go to heaven? Instead of realizing God is a giver. He's an amazing giver. What he wants for us, as Jeremy said in the opening monologue, is abundance. He gave us life, but he said here there's more life to that. Ephesians 3 says, now to him who's able to give you immeasurably more. He's really saying, think of more, Gary. Okay, think some more of that. Now I can give you even more than that. So the perspective is when you're stuck, that will never happen. Can you think about, Jeremy, a time when you were, you thought you were doing right, say in ministry, but yet you were stuck spiritually? We talked a little bit about that last podcast. I mean, you're busy beaver, but yet on a relationship with God, you felt stuck.
Every moment of every day in it. And that's probably why I'm not anymore. Yeah. No, I think I felt like I just had to do.
Yeah.
And just continue to plan and continue to move. And I saw it in all of us that were in that group.
Yeah.
Yep. We would always be moving from one place to another. And if someone came to talk to us, they had to walk with us, yeah. And they you had until I got to the next place and had to do the next thing. And then, hey, come see me later, but later never comes. But the stuckness in the spirituality is is I wasn't feeling like I was. I don't know if I was doing the feeding. I was
Homeless feeding?
no the feeding, the spiritual feeding.
Oh,
right?
okay, gotcha.
So I was speaking. I was doing worship. I was doing planning. I was doing all these things, but there was no outlet for me to really be in the presence of God, to feel that I was being fed.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about this several times during that time, as I didn't feel like I was being fed. So I was looking outside of the perspective to find it, to books, to sermons, to going to other churches at night and doing those things. So I always felt stuck because I felt like there's a certain point where I stopped focusing on myself, and I was actually probably to a certain extent in survival mode during that time.
Yeah.
Because I was just trying to survive this Sunday, and then after Sunday, Monday's rest, and then it all starts up again.
Yeah.
I bet you felt the same way.
Absolutely, yeah.
And sometimes Monday wasn't even rest because you had people emailing you, giving you nasty grams,
or
about
you were just
what
so
you did.
spent that you couldn't even enjoy the rest. You were actually comatose is really what Mondays were.
Yeah, and so I think that in that respect is I always felt like I was going and doing and not so much sitting, being still, listening. You brought up Elijah on the last podcast and talked about how Elijah had the earthquake, the wind, the storms all around him, and then there was God coming to him in a small, still, quiet way.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in survival mode, specifically, just going and doing and never stopping and just trying to make it through the day, that you don't have those times to listen and to sit and to revel in God's creation, in the places that He's put you, in the
grateful for what you already have.
The perspective that's around you. You can't enjoy like we said last week, the 360 because you're so focused on the point ahead of you that you're trying to take yourself, the ministry, and all the people that are in it. You're trying to take them there, that you can't see what God's doing in a 360 or what God's done in a 360 around you.
What I love about Scripture, it just doesn't take all the heroes and tell you all the great things about it, but they'll tell you about the real life about some of the guys in the Bible. And Psalm 73 is one that I refer back to a lot. It's a song of Asaph, who was David's right-hand man. Asaph was in charge of the spiritual protection of Israel. And he starts off chapter 73 by saying, God blesses all those who are righteous, but my feet are slipping. In other words, he was in a place of stuckness. Chapter 73, verse 1 through 20, it was all about being stuck. And he found a bunch of reasons why. Look at them, God. They laugh at your face and you bless them. Look at this guy. He doesn't even believe in you, and he doesn't have a worry in the world. And I'm stuck. Again, that was a perspective. He changed his perspective, and I think verse 25, he said, then he went into the tabernacle. There was no tabernacle then, by the way, because David built the tabernacle. Solomon built the tabernacle. He was David's right-hand man. So really that word means he went into the presence of God, and then he got his perspective changed. Okay, I get it. But it even goes back to that. So how do we get out of stuckness? I think Asaph's story in chapter 73 really tells us how. You have to know a little bit about his job description. So he was the head guy, and he was really the head worshiper. He was in charge of calling all Israel to worship. He was the spiritual protector. And it says in 1 Chronicles, when it tells a little bit about his job description, every day he went before God to plead for Israel. Days he didn't want to, days he didn't feel like it, days he was stuck. The repetition of his life as I went before God and I called on him. And I think I can only reflect my life, but in my moments of stuckness, I don't really go to him. I'm too busy complaining. If I say anything to him, it's what happens in the first 23 verses of Psalm 73. God, why? Why me? Why now? Why this? And that's what you do in your stuckness. But the way out of stuckness is to realize it's the repetition of doing the right thing every day. And as I say that, I feel like I sound like my dad talking to me when I was young. Just do the right thing. There's so much wisdom in that. And I would challenge you, if you find yourself stuck, to realize, and for me, it was, I get up every morning, and like it or not, and I tell God when I get up in the morning, like, I'm really not wanting to talk to you today. but here's what I'm thinking about. And then it usually changes every day, whether he liked it or not. He went before God, and that's when he got some perspective change. So stuckness is just a perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think stuckness and survival mode come out of the same concept that you said doing the right thing. I think doing the right thing to a lot of people can mean different things, right? Doing the right thing can mean starting your day with God, but then after that, it just goes downhill, right?
Right.
So I think doing the right thing can also be the concept and the thought pattern of, like I said before, of being able to say no.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing can be being cognitive. Cognitive, is that the right word?
That's a word.
Is that the right word though?
Don't know.
Cognitive of cognizant. That's what I was going for.
That was the right word.
Cognizant of the thought of really making sure that your life doesn't get out of balance.
Right.
Of making sure that you're not taking on too much. Of making sure that you're saying no to things.
Yeah.
That
maybe sure that that I'm going to feed myself before I go feed others.
Exactly.
First. Yeah.
And that's where, as we talked about the ministry thing, is like I wasn't feeding myself, so I was falling into things. I was falling into tracks that I didn't like. I was falling into sin stuff that I didn't like, and I was rationalizing all that stuff too.
All under the banner, I'm doing the right thing.
Exactly. So the right thing has to kind of be defined a little bit too.
True.
Is the right thing is understanding what is right and then proceeding with it.
Yeah. I think too in our spiritual life we get stuck, and part of getting unstuck is action. I mean, you have to take steps to be unstuck. It took action steps to get stuck, and so it's going to take action steps to get unstuck. And I think that's where most people struggle. When I sit with people, they struggle in their faith. It's interesting. There's what's his name? Mike Novak and Joel Ortenberg are a couple guys that wrote about. I used to struggle with that verse in James where it says, "A man who has faith without works is dead." And that millions of books were written on it. I don't think that I'm going to explain it any better than all the commentaries. But I was reading one guy, and I think he had a great concept. He said there are three kinds of faith. There's your public faith. Those are the things that I say out loud that I want you to believe, whether I believe them or not. I mean, it's biblical. When Herod said to the wise men, "Hey, go find Jesus, bring him back. I want to worship him too." We know that wasn't true. He wanted them to believe that. Then there's that private faith. It's the things I think we say that we really truly believe, but untested, they're not true. So like it was a couple of weeks ago. I'm on this keto-like diet. I've been doing really good. And if you would have said to me, "Hey, would you eat a whole plate of snickerdoodle cookies?" I would have said, "Absolutely not. I'm doing so good. I'm proud of my progress." But the problem was there was no plate of snickerdoodle cookies there to tempt me. So Saturday when there was, I ate a plate of snickerdoodle cookies. Now, when I said it, I truly believed it, that I wouldn't do that. I mean, biblically, when I think Jesus said, "I'm going to be crucified," and Peter says, "I'll not have it. I'll go with you to the end, even if I had to die." And Jesus looks up and says, "No, even you're going to betray me." I think when Peter said that, he truly believed it. What was absent was the little girl at the fire who said, "You're with him." The guards looking for his friends. So I think unstuckness in your faith comes with your actual faith, where your words and your actions meet. And again, that's the action step. Is I might not feel like doing anything in my sense of stuckness, but I'm gonna do it. I don't feel like getting up and feed the homeless today as just a random idea, but I'm gonna do it. My words, and I think that's what causes the stuckness. I know inside that my words and my actions aren't congruent, and so the closer those two get together, where Jesus was probably the only one that was consistent across the board, where his actions, his public faith, his private faith, and his actual faith all overlapped perfectly, and ours just don't. And that does give you a sense of stuckness. But then again, it's when I step back, and as we've talked about almost through every podcast about relationship, if I have some good friends who love me and I love them, we get together and I say my perspective out loud and I allow them to correct me. And I realize this stuckness, as we've talked about reframing, may be for a purpose. So let me find a good purpose in this stuckness. and then let me change my perspective, and then let me have a positive action step that's going to get me out of this. I said a lot, but what'd you hear me say?
Well, I think it's that faith. It's not even faith. Getting stuck is not just about, hey, I want to get unstuck.
Right.
It's about, how do I get unstuck? And then action, having the action of doing that thing to get unstuck. And I think that in that we have to figure out what those action steps are,
Correct.
Whether it be doing the right thing,
Yep.
keeping God first and really trying to figure out what that right thing is beyond that. Or it's the opposite of that too, is I think that there's a lot of times where you being stuck and you being in a place that's in survival mode is also a sense of having fear. It's not only being stuck, it's now you're fearing, well, if I do get unstuck, it's going to cause this uncomfortability, right? For instance, talking Brenda's case that from a couple podcasts ago, is she realizes her family is having these issues. Her job is causing this stress, and to get unstuck when God releases her, like she said, is to let go of my job, and that creates uncomfortability because for instance, it's for me as much as she said it was for Charles, it's the concept of not having the finances to live, and the fear of that financial burden that will be on you. And so her ability to get unstuck was directly related to quitting her job, going home for a while, working part-time, and then going back into full-time
and initially facing those fears, so she's not being fear-driven.
So the thing is, you have to get over that fear. Whatever you're stuck in, is if you're stuck in survival mode because you have too much going on, you have to say no. And there's a fear that comes to saying no. No, I'm not going to work overtime for the 5th straight week. Okay, the fear is you might get fired. You might have financial problems. Saying no is, hey, you know what? I can't go to this birthday party. I've been to, with toddler birthday parties, we have a lot of friends who have birthday parties right in a row, like weekends in a row. You know what? I can't go to this birthday party because, we've been busy as a family, and we just need to sit and rest and have this time with each other. But the fear is that you're going to piss that person off. And so there is that concept that there's fear in the consequences of those action steps that we need to have. I want to get unstuck.
So if the fear is greater, you really won't implement the action steps.
Exactly. I want to get unstuck. I know I need to get unstuck. I know I need to get out of survival mode. But if I say no to these things, what's going to happen to the relationships? What's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to my finances? Am I going to lose my house? I mean, there's a million places you could go, right? But you have to step out. It's almost, goes back to the verse in 1 Timothy where it says, God didn't give us a spirit of fear or timidity. Instead, he gave us a spirit of power, and confidence. And so when we identify those things that we need to get away from, that we need to move away from, and those things that we need to replace them with, like we talked about last week, is when we find those things to replace them with, we need to not go in fear of what might happen, but in a confident, positive way of what is going to happen because of it,
Which is probably the prequel to all of this, is not maybe I need to find the things that got me stuck first, and then start removing those.
And through that, you're going to see the positive impacts. There could be some negative ramifications because of it. But having those positive things that are going to happen, like, again, we'll go back to Brenda's podcast where she shared her story. She said it was the best time my family had. Ever.
Reframing.
And knowing that that's a possibility, is it worth making this huge life change and getting out of survival mode? It is knowing that, hey, you know what, I'm going to have a lot more time and I'm going to have better health. That's the thing for me right now is I've since our conversation with Kyle, I've started trying to put in actionable steps and keep that carrot in front of me. I want to be there for my kids. I want to to be able to see them grow up. I want to be able to help shape them. I want to be all these things and
keeping that why on a loop.
Keeping that why on a loop, right? And so I've had a pretty moderately good success in the last couple of weeks of doing pretty well, 70% well on on what I eat and saying no to things and et cetera. But all of it to say is keeping that why in front of me is going to create that better health, and yeah, it sucks because I want to do these things. I want to say yes to these things, but I know that those things got me in the place where I was stuck. And health is a big component of this. You talked about the spiritual a couple minutes ago, and I wanted to interject, but I'm going to do that now instead, is the reason you don't have the energy level, Jeremy, talking to myself, the reason you don't have the energy level is because you eat like crap. You don't exercise. That's why you're in survival mode is partially because you do that. In addition to that, you stress yourself out with work.
Yep.
You stress yourself out with obligation. You stress yourself out with all these things. Okay. And I can say honestly, I was thinking about it on the way here this morning, is for the first time in a while, I feel this calm in my life because, and that just comes from the energy level. I started doing yoga. I always thought yoga was dumb, but I started doing yoga because my shoulder, the physical pain that my shoulder was going in, right? And
you
that
don't
was
wear tights, do you?
No, I don't wear.
Okay. Now
I don't
the
wear
visual's
yoga
better
pants.
for me right now. Go ahead.
Maybe next week when we record. But the physical ailment was adding to the survival mode. I just want to get through today because I hurt. I feel bad.
Yep.
I have the stress, obligations, etc. Well, I identified that that's part of it, so I started doing yoga. My wife's been trying to get me to do yoga for years and years and years because I am the most inflexible person. Is inflexible the word? Unflexible? I don't know.
You're both, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the most inflexible person in the world. I can't touch my toes. I can't put my arms behind. Like if I ever got, knock on wood, if I ever get arrested, I don't think they can get the handcuffs on me because my arms just don't go that way.
They're just gonna have to
right?
tase you.
I don't want that to happen.
No,
okay.
no.
So anyways, but yeah, I can't get my arms. I'm doing it right now and it hurts. But the inflexibility. So I started doing yoga to get more flexible, to reduce that hurt, to reduce that health aspect. Started eating better. Started doing some light walking.
So you took ownership over your stuff.
Took steps, right?
Yeah.
To get that health in balance, so that now I can start working on the stressful things that are obligations, work related, other finances, things like that. So now I'm starting to get those things, and as I get all the physical, the emotional, and then even the spiritual,
correct.
When I get all those things in tune, and I work on each one, and I keep that carrot in front of me on the loop, right? Then I'm getting to a point where the calm comes.
Yeah.
The survival mode goes away. And
I like so as we're comparing, we've used two terms, and I think we've used them interchangeably, and I think it works.
I think they are, yeah.
But I like the term survival mode better than stuck, because stuck sounds almost hopeless. Survival has the idea that I'm still actively trying to survive. So I mean, that's what you were just saying. You were in survival mode, so you actively took some steps to get yourself out of the place where you needed survival.
And I'm to take it back to your stuck thing, it's like I'm slowly pulling myself out of the quicksand. It's still dragging me down a little bit, but I'm taking intentional physical, emotional, spiritual steps to pull myself out. And I can only think when I get there, it's going to be fun. Yeah.
Well,
and
that's
it's
the old
good.
vaudeville joke, right? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? That's kind of how you get out of stuckness too.
Yeah.
One step at a time, one action step at a time, one perspective at a time. And I guess I don't know if I would call it a loop, but I think the other thing we have to remind ourselves always is not to fall into that fundamental misunderstanding that God is a taker, because he's promised us he's a giver. You know who hates our stuckness more than we do? He does, because he knows he's given us more. And I was talking up at a men's retreat a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling a story about my granddaughter, and she was in a dance recital, and I saw boys looking at her. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna let you know, she's getting ready to be 13. You're not gonna date or marry anybody unless I give you my blessing. And she looked at me, and kind of like, oh. And I remember walking away thinking, does she think I would choose somebody bad? Does she not know I would be out to find the best guy for her? And I kind of relate that to God. Like, even in my stuckness, he has more for me. And I think that needs to be like a secondary loop too. Yeah. He's there to give me more. He's there to give me abundant life, which should motivate me to make an action step then.
Well, and he's there to give you the way out.
Correct.
I think that's something that I thought of this morning on the way here. Is I actually texted my wife. I said, just thank you so much for all you've been doing. I honestly feel like this is a place that I have felt most at peace, most at rest in a while.
Wow.
And
good job, Katie.
I don't feel the stress, and she's been a big part of that. But in that, I say I've taken these action steps, but at the same time, these are action steps that I think I haven't purposefully taken. It's more of God's put them in my way, and I've gone with it.
You've just been obedient to taking that step.
Well, it's not even for me, and I think that's important that it's an obedient step, right?
Yeah.
But this is just like hey, let's try this. How'd that even get in my head? It had to be God.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do yoga. I don't want to go walking. I don't want to eat right.
Yeah.
God's really putting this on, and I've been praying about it. Is, hey, God, I want to get my health in check. I feel like I've been working on it, and I have peaks and valleys, but I really want to get stuff in check because I want to feel better. I want to be here.
So God says, you're right, Jeremy. Said, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to take control of what you eat, and you're going to exercise.
Yeah. And so you have to take those action steps when they're presented. And I didn't notice. Here's the thing is you can rationalize and logically say that, this is just coincidence. This is just stuff that I started doing. But that's what I did this morning. I said, it's not stuff I started doing. It's stuff that's out of my realm of desire to do. It's out of my realm of thought capacity to come up with. It's like God started putting these urges in me. This urge to do yoga. I've known about yoga for 6 years. I haven't done it. I mean,
it goes back to, we talked a little bit off air, and I said part of being unstuck is giving us ourselves the ability to even dream and to dream about bigger things for us. And I truly believe that we wouldn't even be able to dream something if God didn't already give us the capacity to meet that dream.
Yeah.
So, one of the most impactful, in talking to a few people who've listened to our podcast, they pick on certain things that are important to them. And I was just talking to a lady this week who listened to Kevin Kurt's podcast as he worked through cancer sucks one. And when he talked about, he knew prayer was there, but he can't explain it. But now that it's real, I mean, that was really impactful for her, because he still said, I can't explain it. It's not logical, but because I did it, now it's real. And that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. In retrospect, you realize that was God putting me in a place and changing my urges and changing who I. I'll be honest. This is funny, and I'll share this, but it may not resonate with people. But it resonates with me. Is I can honestly say for the last 2 weeks, I ate fried food for the first time yesterday. Not 2 weeks. Sorry, last 10 days. I ate fried food for the first time yesterday, and I was like, I don't even crave it. Like I had cravings for Chick-fil-A. I had cravings for Popeyes. I had cravings to go to Wilderness and go eat a burger and those rosemary fries and duck fat fried fries. AC Wilderness Brewery, amazing, and they don't sponsor us either. That's a shame.
Yeah.
But anyways,
we would eat there all the time if they did. So it's probably good.
Yeah, but those cravings have gone away. Hey, I had it yesterday, but it's not like, oh, I got to go have it right now. I mean, or my next meal. Yes. I really want Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Although I kind of want Chick-fil-A right now, but now that I'm saying
there is one right by where you live, So,
but those those cravings have gone away, and that's not
a great point. I was talking to a lady who's she's one of my clients. She's a nutritionist, and she said once you change your diet, she said it about actually within a week to 2 weeks, you start eating good, you start to crave the things that are good for you, and you start to. And I think that's part of what we were talking about too. The action steps of moving towards God. The more you do it and you get a little peace, the more I want to do it now. Yeah. The more I want to get up and read. I really want to read scripture. I want to. I'm going to stop listening to, what's his name? I'm going to stop listening to Gwen Stefani and what's her boyfriend's name?
Guy from The Voice.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Whatever.
Not Hank Williams.
No, she was dating Hank Williams.
Blake Shelton.
Blake Shelton. I'm going to turn off Blake Shelton and listen to some Hillsong today. And the more I listen to it, the more I want to. And I think that's kind of one of the ways out of being stuck.
Turn off sports radio. I've done that this week. Is turn off sports radio because I listen to sports radio.
Well, let's not get out of control here, Jerry.
Way out. But I'm like, they just say the same crap every single day.
I know.
Start Rosen and all this stuff. So, anyways, Rosen's already starting.
Yeah, he is.
But they dissect it so much. I'm just like, what value does this add to my life? That's where I've gone. And I said, well, these guys they're so loud. They create angst. I've realized they create angst because it's just like you want to argue with them. Because it's like, you're an idiot. But anyways,
which makes you listen the next day.
But then it creates angst, creates extra stress. So what value does this bring to my life? It brings none.
Yeah.
So the last couple of days when I'm going, I'm just thinking about things. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. I'm thinking about how I'm going to make changes in my life. I'm thinking about, what does God want? And start thinking through those things, and it really changes your perspective, like you said. And changing your perspective is key. And so saying no to some things that aren't bad, but aren't exactly edifying or adding value to your life.
And it's no wonder that the Apostle Paul nailed it when he's talking about not being anxious and not being stressed. And you could add in not being stuck or fearful. That's when he says, finally, brothers, as he's writing to the church in Philippians, think on these things, that which is true, that's which is noble, that's what's right and pure, and all. So again, we have the capacity and the remote control to think about these things, and because we think about them, it changes the feeling and the corresponding feelings that go with that. So that's exactly, either we're agreeing with Paul or Paul's agreeing with us, but I think we're on the same page right now.
Well, and so that's getting out of stuckness, and that's doing things better. But you said something I want to come back to it, which is wanting more.
Yeah.
And I think as you're coming out of being stuck, coming out of survival mode, that's when you can actually start dreaming. You can start thinking about what you want to happen in your life.
Yeah.
And because when you're in stuckness, all you want is to get out.
Yeah.
When you're in survival mode, all you want to do is make it through the day.
Correct.
And so your sights can't be set on things above for biblical reference or things that you want to do in your life. Or that you feel God calling you to, or that you feel like are things that you want to accomplish. And so when you're in survival mode, you don't think about all these things that you want to be. So as you're getting out of stuckness, you can start saying, you know what? Once I get healthy, like I was saying a second ago, man, this is going to be a blast.
Yeah.
Once these are the things I want to do. Once I'm able to get healthy and get some control over my work-life ratio and get some control over these things, and maybe it's not control, but maybe get them better in balance, like we said.
Manage better,
manage better, exactly. I want to really start doing this. I want to start doing that. You can dream those things and then start dangling that carrot in front of you.
Yeah.
Because God gives us the ability to dream. He gives us the ability to dream for His purposes and also for things that are going to build us up.
Absolutely.
And so He wants us to follow those desires as long as they're good, but follow those desires of becoming more of the person He created us to be, and be more in tune with that. And so He gives us those dreams to be able to do that and to take us those places. So I think it's important to dream as you're coming out of being stuck, because I think that propels you forward into not being stuck, not being in survival mode, because there's that, not only that light at the end of the tunnel, but there's that goal that you're going for. And if you can keep that in front of you, you can say, okay, hey, that's where I'm going to be. So I just need to keep moving, keep going, and not be in survival mode where I'm stuck, but I'm going to keep moving and keep putting one foot in front of the next.
Survival mode denotes an emptiness, and abundant life denotes a fullness. And that's that. I've had a pretty good life. I wouldn't mind an abundant life, and I know that He's promised me that, and I just need to take advantage of the more that's out there. And again, He doesn't do anything against my will. So just because He will do immeasurably more for me, He's waiting for me to take that action step. He's like, now I can give you a little bit more.
Well, and I think there's a difference between what we're talking about, and I think it's good to identify this. There are preachers out there that say you can have more if you do this.
Correct.
If you have, you can make it happen on your own. You can, the kind of...
we're not talking prosperity gospel stuff here.
Not the prosperity gospel, not the Joel
name it, claim it.
But it's
In case you missed that, he said Joel Osteen.
yeah, Joel Osteen. But it's not about being name it, claim it. It's about putting action in faith. It's about seeing what God wants for you and moving towards it, and He'll keep propelling you in that direction.
It's about turning your private faith and your public faith into an actual faith, and that's when you get more.
And I think it's funny because I've heard people over the years say this, and I think these are people that might have been stuck. You know, not stuck like we're talking about like survival mode stuck, but it's still sticks in the mud. Figuratively,
yes,
probably also true.
True.
Literally. But people that say, you know, I'm just going to pray about it and I'm going to wait for God to, you know, do this. And it's just like, yes, you pray about it. You listen to God's word. I mean, you listen to what God's saying. You read His word. You do these things to understand what His will is. But God uses people to do things. Yeah. And so it's like, hey, God, can you come move this car? He's like, hey, here's the keys. Do it.
I've been wanting to move that car, but I've been waiting for you to get off your butt and move the car. Yeah.
Yeah, you have the keys in your hand. You have gas in the tank. And he's like, what else do you need? Move the car.
Yeah. No,
you know?
So true.
You move the car, and then I'll show you where to drive it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other aspect is it's, you know, we want to do God's will. We want to be on God's path, but sometimes we unintentionally get ourselves stuck in a moment while we're waiting on God, and He's waiting for us to move before He'll move.
Now, you know, we talked a couple of podcasts ago about rest. Sometimes for those of us who are Energizer bunnies and won't stop, stuckness is a good thing because it causes us to rest. So again, that's reframing. Stuckness isn't always bad. Stuckness might be the only thing that got me to the place where I can start to reflect.
But that's not stuckness. That's stillness.
Correct.
You know?
Absolutely correct.
That's being still. Yeah. And I think that there it's also important to identify that there's a difference between being still and being stuck.
Absolutely.
Stuck is where you can't get out of it without moving, you know, and stillness is
I'm going to take a breath and wait till my next.
It's a choice to consciously stop and wait, and rest and relax in that.
Good point.
But you can start up just as quick as you stopped, you know?
Yep.
So I think there is a difference there.
Yep. So I know if you're listening to the last few podcasts, we haven't said anything outrageously new, but I think we've said things that you resonate with because everybody we talk to faces this at some place. And maybe you're as you're listening to this right now, God's put His finger on you and said, you're not stuck. It's just time to change perspective and get an action step. And there's more for you. There's immeasurably more for you. So I hope you can be encouraged by listening to this and not use this to beat yourself up. The worst thing a pastor or a podcaster could do is to get on here and tell you how bad you should feel about how bad you already feel. That's not our goal. Our goal is to encourage you and to say, if this is where you find yourself, there's ways out. And, you know, we may only be 1 or 2 steps ahead. We're still figuring out, but at least I think we're moving, and that's the encouraging thing.
And that's the key is to identify where you're at, identify what's gotten you there.
Yep.
Replace it with movement, and replace it with prayer, and replace it with seeking out help, and actually start propelling yourself or being propelled by those things going forward. So hopefully in our conversation and our stories today, you find some solace knowing that you're not alone. You find some understanding in how to get yourself moving, and hopefully that you can get your life more in balance with where God wants it to be. And so we pray that you do those things, that you make some actionable steps after you've identified where you're at and what's gotten you there.
Yep.
Make some actionable steps and keep that carrot in front of you. Keep understanding why you're moving, and keep pursuing those things, and then start dreaming.
Yep.
And that's really what we think. You know, God doesn't want us stuck. God wants us to continue to grow and continue to, I know I said this word a couple podcasts ago, but evolve and become more like Him.
Yeah.
and have deeper relationships with him and with others. And when we're stuck, when we're in survival mode, that's just not possible.
Yeah. God's a giver, not a taker.
Yeah. And so start moving. Get out of that survival mode. Make intentional, actionable steps. And if you need help doing that, reach out to people around you. Reach out to us. We'll give you insight from our lives, but I think that's important to do. And so a couple places you can get a hold of us is on our social media platforms, facebook.com/RP podcast, Instagram @RP podcast, and Twitter @the RP podcast. You can also listen to any of the podcasts that we brought up, from Brenda to Kyle to stress to the marriage ones that we've talked about. They're all on rppodcast.com, and you can listen to them there, or you can subscribe to any of our different podcast locations. They all have subscribe buttons, so feel free to subscribe, and those things will pop in to your app whenever we release a new one. So do that, and feel free to share it with people that you think might be stuck, that might be in survival mode, that might need help out. Feel free to do that, and we hope that it's a blessing to you and to them, and hopefully we can start seeing some movement, some intentionality, and some people becoming the people that God created them to be. So hopefully you can do that. Hopefully we can do that, and hopefully we can all become better at that. So we are so glad that you listened today, and we just hope that your week is incredible, and thank you so much for listening.